Story 1. The Blizzard Watcher. The footprints in the snow led directly to my bedroom window, but they didn't lead away. I pressed my face against the frosted glass, my breath fogging the pain as I traced the deep impressions with my eyes. Size 12 boots, heavy tread. They started at the tree line 50 yards out, marched straight across my backyard through 3 feet of fresh powder, and stopped right here, right where someone would stand to watch me sleep. My name is David, and I'm a freelance writer who moved to this isolated cabin in northern Alaska specifically for the solitude. What I found instead was something far more terrifying than writer's block. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days straight, the kind of storm that makes you grateful for thick walls and a well-stocked pantry. I'd been working on my novel, lost in the rhythm of typing and the howling wind outside. It was the perfect atmosphere for writing horror, until the horror became real. It started with a feeling. You know that prickle on the back of your neck when someone's watching you? I kept looking up from my laptop, scanning the windows, but seeing nothing except swirling white death outside. The storm was so intense I couldn't see 10 feet beyond the glass, but then the power went out. The sudden silence was deafening after 3 days of electrical hum. No heater, no lights, just me, my dying laptop battery, and the relentless whisper of snow against the windows. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the generator outside. That's when I first saw them, fresh footprints, circling my cabin like a predator stalking prey. The prints were huge, definitely human. But something was wrong with the gait. Too wide, too deliberate. Like someone was taking their time, studying every angle of my home. I followed them with my flashlight beam, my heart hammering as they traced a perfect circle around the entire structure. Whoever made these prints had been out there for hours, just watching. I rushed back inside, triple-checking every lock, every window latch. The cabin suddenly felt paper-thin, like those walls couldn't protect me from whatever was lurking in that white void. I tried calling for help, but the storm had knocked out cell service. The landline was dead too. I was completely alone. The first knock came at midnight. 3 slow, deliberate raps on the front door. I froze, flashlight beam trembling in my hand. No one could have made it up here in this storm. The road was impassable, but those knocks, as they were patient, methodical, like whoever was out there had all the time in the world. I didn't answer, didn't even breathe. The knocking moved to the kitchen window, then the back door, then my bedroom window. Someone was making a circuit around my cabin, testing every possible entry point. Each series of knocks was exactly the same. 3 slow raps, then silence. This went on for 2 hours. I huddled in the center of the living room, flashlight pointed at whichever direction the knocking was coming from. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the light steady. Whoever was out there wasn't going away. They were methodical, patient, hunting. Then the knocking stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the sound. At least when they were knocking, I knew where they were. Now, they could be anywhere. I sat in that darkness, straining my ears for any sound over the storm. Nothing. Just wind and snow and my own ragged breathing. That's when I heard the scratching. It started at the front door. A slow, deliberate scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across wood, but deeper, rougher. Like someone was using something sharp to carve into the door itself. The sound made my teeth ache, sent shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I crept toward the front door, flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The scratching continued, methodical and purposeful. When I pressed my ear to the door, I could hear breathing on the other side. Slow, measured breaths that fogged in the frigid air. "I know you're in there," a voice whispered through the wood. The voice was wrong, too deep, too hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. The scratching stopped. "I've been watching you, right?" the voice continued. "Every night, every word. You write about monsters, but you don't know what real monsters look like." My blood turned to ice water. They'd been watching me work? For how long? The cabin had floor-to-ceiling windows facing my desk. If someone was out there in the tree line with binoculars. "Let me in, David. The storm's getting worse. I'm so very cold. How did they know my name?" I backed away from the door, mind racing. No one knew I was here. I'd paid cash for the rental, told no one where I was going. This was supposed to be my secret retreat. But somehow, this thing, this person, they knew exactly who I was. The scratching resumed, but now it was everywhere. All around the cabin. Multiple sources. Like there was more than one of them out there, all working together to claw their way inside. The sound was maddening, drilling into my skull like nails on a chalkboard. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed the hunting rifle I'd brought for protection against bears. My hands fumbled with the ammunition, dropping bullets in my panic. The scratching was getting louder, more frantic. Whatever was out there was running out of patience. A window shattered in the kitchen. Glass exploded inward, followed by a gust of Arctic air that nearly knocked me over. Snow swirled through the opening, and I heard wet footsteps on the kitchen floor. Slow, deliberate. They were inside. I raised the rifle, finger on the trigger, flashlight beam shaking as I aimed toward the kitchen. The footsteps stopped just beyond the doorway, waiting. I could hear that same hollow breathing. Closer now. Much closer. "You can't hide from me, David. I know every inch of this place. I've been preparing. Preparing for what?" I edged toward the kitchen, rifle ready. The beam of my flashlight swept across overturned chairs, broken glass, and puddles of melting snow. But no intruder. The kitchen appeared empty except for the gaping hole where my window used to be. Then I looked up. They were on the ceiling. A figure dressed in white, clinging to the wooden beams like some kind of human spider. Their face was hidden in shadow, but I could see their eyes reflecting my flashlight beam. Pale, hungry, completely inhuman. I fired without thinking. The shot echoed through the cabin like thunder. The figure dropped from the ceiling, landing hard on the kitchen floor. I kept the rifle trained on them, but they weren't moving. Dark liquid spread across the white snow on my floor, but it wasn't red, it was black. I approached slowly, flashlight beam focused on the motionless form. They were wearing a white winter suit, face covered by a ski mask. I reached down to pull the mask away. The body was empty, just clothes stuffed with snow and leaves. "A decoy. Behind you," that hollow voice whispered. I spun around, but it was too late. Something heavy crashed into me, sending the rifle flying. I hit the floor hard, flashlight skittering across the kitchen tiles. In the spinning beam, I caught glimpses of my attacker. It was a man, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. His skin was pale as fresh snow, his eyes completely black. He moved with inhuman grace, like gravity didn't quite apply to him. When he smiled, his teeth were sharp, filed to points. "I've been so lonely out here," he said, pinning me to the floor with impossible strength. "All these months, watching you through the windows, waiting for the perfect storm, the kind of blizzard that cuts you off from the world completely." His breath was like ice against my face. I struggled beneath him, but he was far stronger than any human should be. My flashlight beam illuminated his face from below, casting horrible shadows across his features. "What do you want?" I gasped. "Company. he whispered. Forever. He pressed something cold against my neck. A syringe. I felt a sharp pinch, then liquid fire spreading through my veins. My vision blurred, limbs growing heavy. Whatever he'd injected me with was working fast. Don't worry. His voice seemed to come from very far away. The transformation doesn't hurt much. Soon you'll be just like me. Patient, hungry, and we'll wait together for the next writer to find this place. As consciousness faded, I realized the horrible truth. This wasn't random. He'd been here before, waiting, hunting. And I wasn't the first person to rent this cabin seeking solitude. The darkness took me, and when I woke up, I understood. I understood the hunger, the need for company during the long, isolated months, the way fresh blood tastes so much better when it's warmed by fear. I understood why we choose writers. Creative minds are so much more entertaining to break. Now I'm the one who waits, the one who watches through frosted windows as new tenants arrive at our little retreat, the one who leaves footprints in the snow just to let them know they're not alone. Last week, a young novelist rented the cabin for a winter writing residency. She's been here 3 days now, working on what she thinks will be her breakthrough horror novel. She keeps looking up from her laptop with that familiar feeling that someone's watching. Tonight, when the blizzard reaches its peak and the power goes out, I'll knock on her door. 3 slow, deliberate raps, just like my predecessor taught me. And if she's very unlucky, she'll be just creative enough to join our little writing community permanently. I never finished my novel, but if you're thinking about renting an isolated cabin for your next writing retreat, maybe choose somewhere with neighbors instead. Because sometimes the monsters we write about aren't fiction at all. Sometimes they're just waiting for new material. Story 2. The Ice Fisher's Catch. The hole in the ice was perfectly round, 6 inches across, and something had pulled my friend Marcus through it. The problem was, the hole was too small for a human body. My name is Jake, and I've been ice fishing these Minnesota lakes since I was old enough to hold a rod. 23 years of experience on the ice, and I thought I'd seen everything. Hypothermia, ice breaks, equipment failures. But what happened that February morning redefined the word impossible for me. Marcus had been my fishing partner for over a decade. We knew each other's rhythms on the ice like an old married couple. That's why I noticed immediately when his usual chatter stopped. 1 minute he was complaining about his ex-wife. The next, silence. I looked up from my own hole to see his fishing chair empty, his rod still in the holder, line disappearing straight down through the ice. The coffee he'd been drinking was still steaming in the cup holder. He'd vanished mid-sentence. "Marcus?" I called out, thinking maybe he'd gone to take a leak behind our shelter, but his voice didn't echo back across the frozen lake, just whined in the occasional crack of shifting ice. I walked over to his spot, and that's when I saw the impossible hole. The opening was pristine, smooth, like it had been cut with a laser rather than the power auger sitting beside Marcus's chair. But the diameter, no way a grown man could fit through something that narrow. I could barely fit my fist through it, yet his fishing line was tight, angled steeply downward, like something massive was on the other end. Something that was pulling with enough force to make the rod bend nearly in half. I grabbed the rod and felt the weight immediately. Whatever was down there was huge, and heavy, and moving with purpose. The drag was screaming as line peeled off the reel, but I managed to start working it back up. Hand over hand, I fought whatever was on the end of that line. My arms burned, my back ached, but I kept pulling. The hole was so small I couldn't see anything below the surface, just black water and that terrible, steady weight. After 10 minutes of fighting, something pale appeared in the darkness below. Marcus's face. He was staring up at me through the ice hole, eyes wide with terror, mouth moving like he was trying to scream. but no sound reached the surface. He looked compressed somehow, flattened, like he'd been squeezed through something impossibly narrow. I dropped to my knees, reaching toward the hole. "Marcus, grab my hand." But as I got closer, I realized something was horribly wrong with his proportions. His shoulders were too narrow. His head was elongated, like someone had pushed him through a tube and stretched him in the process. He reached up with one arm, and it kept coming. His arm extended through that 6-inch hole like rubber, stretching impossibly as his hand emerged into the frigid air, his fingers wrapped around my wrist with inhuman strength. His grip was ice cold and slippery. When I tried to pull him up, he felt weightless, but wrong. Like pulling taffy instead of a human being, his arms stretched and stretched, but the rest of him remained trapped below the ice. "Help me," he whispered, his voice distorted and hollow. "It changed me, Jake. It made me flexible." "What changed you? What's down there?" Instead of answering, Marcus's elongated arm suddenly yanked downward with tremendous force. I barely had time to let go before I would have been pulled into that impossible hole myself. His rubber-like limb snapped back into the water like a released bungee cord. I scrambled backward, heart hammering. What I'd just seen violated every law of physics I knew. People don't stretch like that. Bodies don't compress and extend like they're not solid anymore. I grabbed my cell phone, hands shaking as I dialed 911. But there was no signal out here on the lake, just static, and the growing certainty that I was completely alone with whatever nightmare was happening beneath the ice. The fishing rod was moving again, bending and straightening in a rhythmic pattern, almost like Morse code. I watched it for several minutes, trying to decode the message, and gradually realized it was spelling out words. HELP. Over and over again. I looked back at the hole, and Marcus's face had returned. But this time, his features were even more distorted. His eyes were larger, taking up most of his elongated skull. His mouth was a thin line stretched across what remained of his face. "It lives down here," he said, his voice barely a whisper through the ice. "In the deep water. It's been waiting so long for company. It made me like itself. So I can fit through small spaces. So I can hunt." "Hunt for what?" Marcus smiled then, and his teeth had multiplied. Rows and rows of sharp points filled his stretched mouth. "For friends. It gets so lonely in the winter. But now we can bring others down. Others like you." The ice around the hole began to crack, thin lines spreading outward like a spider web. But these weren't random stress fractures. They were forming a pattern, a perfect circle about 6 feet in diameter. The section of ice I was standing on was being cut free from below. I ran for solid ice, but the cracks followed me. Whatever was beneath the surface was methodically cutting out sections of the frozen lake, creating holes large enough for a full-sized human to fall through. Behind me, I heard a wet, slithering sound. I turned to see Marcus's impossibly elongated body emerging from the original hole like a snake. His torso stretched and compressed as he pulled himself onto the ice, leaving a trail of black water in his wake. "Don't run, Jake," he called out, his voice echoing strangely across the lake. "It doesn't hurt to change. And you'll never be cold again. Never be alone." I sprinted toward shore, but the ice beneath my feet was becoming increasingly unstable. More holes were opening everywhere, each one perfectly round, each one just wide enough for something inhuman to emerge. That's when I saw them. Other fishermen. Dozens of them. All stretched and distorted like Marcus, all emerging from holes across the lake. Some I recognized from years of fishing these waters. Tom Henderson, who disappeared 3 winters ago. The Kowalski brothers, missing since last fall. All of them changed. All of them hunting. They moved across the ice like liquid, flowing around obstacles, stretching and compressing their bodies to match the terrain, and they were all converging on me. The closest one reached me first, old Pete Murphy, who taught me to ice fish when I was 12. His body was stretched so thin he looked like a human noodle, but his face was still recognizable, still kind, in a horrifying way. "Jake boy," he said, his voice like wind through a hollow tree. "Don't be afraid. It's beautiful down there. Peaceful. No more worrying about bills or broken marriages or getting old. Just floating. Forever. Pete, what happened to you? I found what lives in the deep water," he said, reaching out with arms that extended like rubber hoses. "It's old, Jake. Older than the lakes themselves. It's been sleeping down there for thousands of years, dreaming of friends, of companions who could share the endless quiet. More of them were surrounding me now, a circle of stretched, impossible fishermen, all speaking in voices like winter wind. "It doesn't hurt," said Tom Henderson, his head bobbing on a neck that was far too long. "The changing, it just adjusts you, makes you compatible with the deep places. Come with us," urged the Kowalski brothers, speaking in unison with voices that harmonized in impossible ways. "The water's fine once you get used to it. And the fishing, Jake, the fishing is incredible down there." I felt my feet slipping on the increasingly unstable ice. The holes were connecting now, creating a web of open water that would soon leave me with nowhere to run. "What does it want?" I shouted, though I was beginning to understand. "Company," Marcus said, slithering closer on his serpentine body. "It's been alone so long, Jake. Sleeping in the deep places, dreaming of voices and laughter and human warmth. We keep it company now. We tell it stories about the world above. We teach it about ice fishing and friendship and all the things it never had. And in return, it gives us eternity. No more cold. No more loneliness. No more death. Just endless conversation in the depths of the lake." The ice beneath me finally gave way. I plunged into water so cold it felt like liquid nitrogen, but hands were there immediately. Dozens of stretched rubber arms pulling me down into darkness. Not violently, gently, like old friends helping me into a comfortable chair. The water around me began to glow with a soft, phosphorescent light. And I saw it, the thing that lived in the deep water. It was massive, a jellyfish-like creature the size of a building, with tendrils that stretched through the entire lake system. But it wasn't malevolent. It was curious. Ancient and curious and impossibly lonely. It touched my mind with thoughts like deep ocean currents, and I understood everything. It had been sleeping beneath the ice for millennia, occasionally waking to find the world above changed and strange. It had learned about humanity by pulling down the occasional ice fishermen, not to harm them but to transform them, to make them compatible with the deep places, so they could teach it about the surface world. They weren't prisoners. They were ambassadors. The creature's touch began to change me, and I felt my body becoming more flexible, more adaptable to the crushing depths. My lungs filled with water, but I could still breathe. My bones became cartilage. My flesh became elastic. I was becoming something that could survive in the deep places. "Welcome, Jake," Marcus said, his voice now perfectly clear through the water. "We've been waiting for you to join our fishing club." He was right. It wasn't painful. It was actually peaceful. The constant worry about mortgages and relationships and growing old just faded away, replaced by the simple joy of existence in the quiet depths. Now I spend my days swimming through the underwater forests of the lake, catching fish with my bare hands and sharing stories with my old fishing buddies. We tell the ancient creature about ice fishing tournaments and summer barbecues and all the surface traditions it finds so fascinating. And sometimes, when new fishermen come to the lake, We help them experience the same peace we've found. Last week, a father and son set up their equipment right over our favorite spot. They seemed lonely, talking about how the boy's mother had left them for another man, how they didn't have much else besides their weekend fishing trips. We gave them exactly what they needed: companionship that will last forever. If you're planning an ice fishing trip this season, stick to the popular lakes, the crowded ones, because something lives in those deep, isolated waters. Something that's very good at making friends, whether they want to be friends or not. And once you join our underwater fishing club, you'll never want to leave. Story 3. The Snow Day Substitute. The substitute teacher who showed up during the blizzard wasn't in our system. His name wasn't on any roster. He had no background check on file. And according to the principal's computer, he didn't exist. But he knew every student's name and their fears. My name is Tom, and I'm the head of security at Pine Ridge Elementary. It's a small school in rural Colorado, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing exciting ever happens, until the day the snow started falling and never stopped. The blizzard hit us during second period. What started as light flurries quickly escalated into a whiteout that shut down the entire county. By lunchtime, we had 3 feet of fresh powder and no sign of it letting up. The superintendent called it early, but the buses couldn't make it up the mountain roads. We were snowed in with 43 students and a skeleton crew of staff. That's when he appeared. I was helping Mrs. Patterson organize sleeping arrangements for the stranded kids when I noticed an unfamiliar man in the hallway. Tall, pale, wearing a perfectly clean white coat despite the raging storm outside. He was moving from classroom to classroom, peering through the windows at the children inside. "Excuse me," I called out, approaching him carefully. "I don't think we've been introduced. I'm Tom Hendricks, head of security." He turned slowly, and I immediately noticed something off about his face. Too symmetrical, too smooth, like he was wearing a mask of human features rather than actual skin. "I'm the substitute," he said, his voice carrying an odd echo despite the carpeted hallway. "Mr. Winter. I'm here to help with the children during the emergency." I checked my clipboard. No substitute had been scheduled. More importantly, no one could have made it through the storm to reach our school. The roads had been impassable for hours. "I'm sorry, but I don't see your name on our list, and I'm not sure how you got here with the roads closed." "Oh, I have my ways," he said, smiling with too many teeth. "The snow and I are old friends. Don't worry about paperwork. The children need supervision, don't they?" Before I could respond, he glided past me toward the 3rd grade classroom. I say glided because his feet didn't seem to touch the ground properly. No footprints on the wet floor from melted snow. No sound of footsteps. I followed him, increasingly uneasy. Something about this man set off every alarm bell in my head, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. He just felt wrong. Mrs. Patterson met us at the classroom door. "Oh good, another adult. These kids are getting restless being cooped up. This is Mr. Winter," I said carefully. "He says he's a substitute, but I can't find him in our system." Mr. Winter stepped forward, and I swear the temperature in the hallway dropped 10 degrees. "Children need stories during storms," he said, "especially stories about the snow. May I?" Mrs. Patterson looked to me uncertainly. We were short-staffed and dealing with an unprecedented situation. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Just keep an eye on things," I muttered to Mrs. Patterson. "I'm going to check with the office," but when I reached the main office, Principal Davis was dealing with frantic phone calls from parents. The storm had knocked out most communication, and everyone was demanding to know when their children could come home. I tried looking up Mr. Winter in our substitute database. Nothing. Called the district office. Their lines were dead. checked the visitor log. No one had signed in since yesterday afternoon. A child's scream echoed from the third grade hallway. I ran back to find the classroom in chaos. Kids were pressed against the far wall, crying and pointing at Mr. Winter, who stood calmly at the front of the room. The lights were flickering, and frost was forming on the windows despite the building's heating system. "What's going on here?" I demanded. Mr. Winter was telling us about the Snow Children. Little Emma Martinez sobbed. He said they live in the storm and they're always hungry. Mr. Winter smiled that too wide smile. "Just sharing local folklore, Mr. Hendricks. Children love scary stories." "He knew about my nightmares," whispered Tyler Kim. "He knew about the thing under my bed. He said it follows kids through the snow. And he knew my dad's name," added Sarah Coleman. "But my dad's been deployed overseas for 6 months. How did he know about him?" I looked at Mr. Winter more carefully. His skin was so pale it was almost translucent. His eyes were pale blue, like ice, and they never seemed to blink. When he breathed, no vapor came from his mouth despite the sudden cold in the room. "I think we need to step outside and talk," I said firmly. "Of course," Mr. Winter replied. "But first, let me tell the children one more story about what happens to little boys and girls who get lost in blizzards." Before I could stop him, he began speaking in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The children fell silent, transfixed by his words. "Long ago, when the first snow fell on these mountains, a teacher and his students were trapped in a school just like this one. The storm lasted for days, weeks. The food ran out. The heat failed. One by one, the children began to disappear. The frost on the windows was spreading, creating intricate patterns like lace. The temperature continued to drop, and I could see the children's breath misting in the air. The teacher grew so hungry," Mr. Winter continued. "So very, very hungry. But he discovered that fear tastes better than anything else. Sweet, pure, innocent fear." "That's enough," I said, stepping forward. But my feet slipped on ice that hadn't been there moments before. The entire floor was becoming a skating rink. The teacher learned to feed on terror instead of food. Mr. Winter went on, his voice growing deeper. He learned to survive winter after winter, moving from school to school, telling stories to children who could never tell anyone else what they'd heard. "Why can't they tell?" asked Emma, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Winter's smile stretched impossibly wide. "Because they never leave the schools alive." That's when the lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard children screaming, the sound of desk chairs scraping across ice, Mr. Winter's laughter echoing from impossible directions. I fumbled for my flashlight, hands numb with sudden cold. The beam illuminated a nightmare. Mr. Winter was no longer human-shaped. He had stretched and expanded, filling half the classroom like some kind of frozen spider. His limbs were long and jointed in too many places, his face a pale mask floating in the darkness. Icicles hung from his hair like a crystal crown. The children were frozen solid, not dead. Frozen, turned to ice sculptures while maintaining perfect awareness. I could see their eyes tracking my movement. Filled with terror but unable to move or speak, they'd become living decorations for his winter palace. "Don't look so worried, Mr. Hendricks," Mr. Winter said, his voice now a chorus of whispers. "They're not in pain. They're preserved, perfect, and they'll make such wonderful company during the long winter months." I ran for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. Ice spread across the surface, sealing it solid. The windows were completely frosted over, no way to see outside or call for help. "You can't leave," Mr. Winter continued. "You're part of the story now. The security guard who tried to save them but failed. Such a tragic tale. I felt the cold creeping up my legs, turning my muscles stiff and unresponsive. But I still had my radio. With numb fingers, I managed to key the mic. "Emergency in classroom 3B, I gasped into the device. "Something's wrong with the substitute teacher. He's not human," Static answered me. But then, faintly, Mrs. Patterson's voice. "Tom? Are you all right? We lost power about 10 minutes ago." "Don't come to 3B, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady as ice crystals formed on my breath. "Whatever you do, don't let anyone come to this classroom." "Tom, I'm looking at 3B right now. It's empty. Has been all day." Empty? That was impossible. I could see the frozen children all around me, could feel Mr. Winter's icy presence looming overhead. "The substitute," I whispered. "Mr. Winter. He's turning them all to ice. Tom, there's no substitute here. Never has been. You're the only adult in that hallway." I looked around the classroom with new understanding. The children weren't frozen. They were gone. Had been gone. Mr. Winter's victims from decades past, preserved in ice and snow, invisible to everyone except those he chose to show them to. "You're beginning to understand, Mr. Winter said, his massive form looming over me. "This isn't your first time in this classroom, Mr. Hendricks. You've been here before. Many times." Images flashed through my mind. Other blizzards, other emergencies, other times I'd found myself trapped in this frozen classroom with Mr. Winter and his collection of ice children. "How long have I been here?" I asked. "Since 1987, he replied gently. "You were the first adult who tried to stop me. So brave, so determined to protect the children. I've kept you as my special helper ever since." The memories came flooding back. 35 years of the same routine. Every winter, when the storms were bad enough to trap people at the school, Mr. Winter would appear, and I would try to stop him, and fail, and forget. Until the next time, the children in this room, they're not from today. "Oh no," Mr. Winter laughed, his voice like wind chimes made of ice. "These are my collection from decades past. Little Emma here has been with me since 1991. Tyler joined us in 2003. Sarah's quite new. Only 5 years now. What happened to the children who were actually here today?" "Safe," he said. "Warm and safe in other classrooms with other teachers. I only take the special ones, Mr. Hendricks. The ones who remind me of children from my own time, when I was alive, when I was still human." "You were a teacher?" "Once. A very long time ago. Before the accident. Before the fire that took my school and all my students. I couldn't save them then, but I can preserve others now. Forever young, forever innocent, forever mine." The ice around my legs was almost to my waist now, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I understood my role in this endless winter theater. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "What you always do," Mr. Winter said kindly. "Try to save them. Fail heroically. Forget everything until next time. It's such a beautiful story, Mr. Hendricks. The brave security guard who never gives up, even though he can never win. And the real children? The ones who are actually trapped here during real storms? They go home to their families with wonderful memories of the nice substitute teacher who told them amazing stories about winter magic. They never remember the scary parts, only the wonder. I felt the ice reaching my chest, but instead of panic, I felt peace. This was my purpose, my eternal role in Mr. Winter's endless story, the guardian who could never save anyone, but who would never stop trying. "Will I remember this conversation? For a few minutes," he said sadly. "Then the ice will take you, and you'll sleep until the next storm. Until the next group of children needs their heroic security guard to almost save them. The cold reached my heart, and everything went white. I woke up several hours later when the rescue crews finally made it through the storm. They found me unconscious in an empty classroom, suffering from severe hypothermia. The official report blamed it on a heating system malfunction. The children were all accounted for, safe in other parts of the building. No one remembered a substitute teacher. No one had seen Mr. Winter except me. But as I was being loaded into the ambulance, little Emma Martinez ran up to me. "Mr. Hendricks," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Thank you for protecting us from the Winter Man. He told us you always try to save the children, even when you can't. He says you're the bravest person he knows." I stared at Emma, memories flickering at the edge of my consciousness. Something about ice, about frozen children, about a teacher who wasn't quite human. But the memories faded as the medics gave me something for the pain. Just fragments of dreams brought on by hypothermia and stress. "You're welcome, Emma," I said, though I wasn't sure what I'd protected her from. "Just doing my job." As the ambulance pulled away, I saw a figure in white standing at the school entrance, too far away to make out clearly, but he seemed to be waving goodbye. "See you next storm," the wind seemed to whisper. "See you next winter. If you work in a school and a substitute shows up during a blizzard, check the roster twice. Because some teachers never retire. They just wait for the perfect storm to continue their lessons. And some protectors are doomed to repeat their failures forever, finding meaning in the attempt even when victory is impossible. The children are always saved. It's the adults who get lost in the winter stories that never end. If you've enjoyed these tales of winter wonder and terror, please consider sharing your own snow-covered stories in the comments below. Some experiences are too strange to keep to ourselves, and winter has a way of revealing truths that other seasons keep hidden. Hit that like button if these stories sent chills down your spine. Subscribe for more tales that explore the mysterious boundaries between the natural and supernatural worlds. And remember, when the snow starts falling and the world turns white, pay attention to the shadows, because sometimes the most beautiful winters hide the most dangerous secrets. Stay warm, stay safe, and stay curious about the strange things that happen when the world disappears under a blanket of snow.